We all know that this Texas offense is going to be special in 2026, but just how special could it be?
Yards shy of the record. Williams breaks a hole. Williams, hello record book. Ricky Williams runs to the Hall of Fame. Touchback. Ricky Williams, touchdown.
Young from the shotgun. Back to throw. Vince looks. Under pressure. He'll tuck it in run. Vince to the 5. Young. Touchdown Texas. Touchdown Vince Young. He's done it again.
Longhorn Nation, we're back.
Welcome into another edition of the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast. I'm your host, Matt Galatzin, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Zach Dimmitt. Zach, we all know that this Texas offense in 2026 is getting a ton of pub thanks to the additions of Cam Coleman, Hollywood Smothers, Raleek Brown, Melvin Siani, everything that they've done to acquire talent, plus Arch Manning, Ryan Wingo, and the host of players that they do have returning as well. And it kind of brought up the discussion, between the two of us recently, and we decided to talk about it on the pod. How special can this Texas offense really be? Could it actually be the best Texas offense that we've seen since Colt McCoy took Texas to a national championship, or maybe even better than that? That is something that I want to discuss here. And look, obviously, we don't want to put too many expectations on this team. I mean, we saw what happened last year with preseason number one. Arch Manning is the Heisman favorite and all these things. And it didn't really work out that way, at least for the first few weeks, before it balanced itself out at the end of the season and they really started hitting the ground running. But the fact remains, there is so much talent on this offense. There's an elite player at every position. They're going to have 6 new starters or something like that on the offensive side of the ball. And it kind of feels like an offense that if Steve Sarkisian could put it on paper what he wanted, this would be it. So, I mean, could it be the best Texas offense ever? We're going to go through it here in a sec, but I think it really does have a chance to be up there with the best, with Colt McCoy, with Vince Young, and some of those other offenses that we've seen here in the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think, it necessarily will be the best Texas offense ever, but certainly in potentially the discussion when you just look at it on paper. But as the cliche goes, championships and games aren't won on paper. So we just got to see how things play out. You never know what kind of injuries could happen. I think the potential is definitely there. And it all starts, as I've said before, and, it seems pretty simple, but it really just comes down to it. I think it all starts with Arch Manning getting off to a better start than he did last season. It can't get much worse than the way that he started last year. It was just the non-conference play production was not what you wanted it to be. It's pretty crazy to see the way that he elevated his game as the season went on. It wasn't all perfect and flashy and things like that, but even in the losses to like Georgia and not Ohio State as much, that was a pretty rough one for the most part, but you saw some flashes at the end of that game. But against Georgia, I think he made some good throws, made some good plays. It was just Texas's defense couldn't stop the Bulldogs in the second half, and obviously that onside kick just completely flipped all momentum. It really wasn't Arch struggling. That wasn't really the reason why Texas lost that game, in my opinion. It wasn't perfect, of course, but seeing the way he played in Athens compared to the way he played in Columbus was night and day. And so it all starts with the way that he's growing. Of course, he underwent offseason, foot surgery and things like that, but he should be good to go. You don't have any concerns about that at all. So I think, with the way that he starts this season, this upcoming season, this fall, building chemistry with the new guys, an improved offensive line, when you combine all those things together, and then overall just the talent of the group, I think there's certainly a chance it could be one of the best. Saying it's going to be the best is just, in my opinion, simply a stretch at this point in the offseason. We just don't know. Well, the spring game, I can see Arch Manning and Cam Coleman connecting for like 3 touchdowns, and people are going to drink the Kool-Aid until they pass out. and I don't blame him. But I just think that give it some time. Even that first game against Texas State for the season opener, it may look really really good, but we'll have to wait and see until they host Ohio State in week 2 to really, know if the hype is, warranted with it being the best Texas offense ever. So, but certainly in the discussion, I think the potential is all there. But long way to go until we really know the answer to that one. But the potential is certainly there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously this is a ton of projection on our part, right? Like we're kind of lending toward the Kool-Aid drinking, so to speak, with kind of pumping up the offense in this way. But when you look at the personnel and you look at what Steve Sarkisian likes to do offensively, it kind of lines up at least a little bit with in terms of talent from position by position. It could line up a little bit to the 2020 Alabama Crimson Tide offense, which was arguably Steve Sarkisian's best offense that he's ever had. Mac Jones threw for 4,500 yards, and let's see how many touchdowns. Mac Jones threw for 4,500 yards. He threw for 41 touchdowns. He had 4 interceptions. Najee Harris ran for almost 1,500 yards and 26 touchdowns. He had 30 touchdowns from scrimmage. Devontae Smith won the Heisman that year. He had 1,856 yards receiving and 23 touchdowns. They also had John Mechie go for 916 yards and 6 scores. And Jalen Waddle had 591 yards and 4 yards. Dude, what a receiving core. Oh, my goodness. And they also had an elite offensive line. And there are certain things that Texas has that stack up to what Alabama had that season. Arch Manning and Mac Jones, like maybe he will have a Mac Jones type year. Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown, both are immensely more talented than what they had at the running back position last year. And, Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, Emmett Mosley, that may not be Devontae Smith, John Mechie, and Jalen Waddle, but it's pretty dang close. Like that's a really, really good receiving core right there. So the opportunities are there. And, if you kind of look at and we're not saying that it's going to be that level of production either. We're talking about in terms of the Texas Longhorns, could it be the best in program history in that sense? Which no Texas offense has ever come close to what that Alabama offense did in 2020.
Right.
Like 2008, 2009, Colt McCoy teams were a very prolific offense. Most of it came through the air. The running game was kind of up and down. Colt McCoy had to run the ball a lot in that offense for them to be successful on the ground as well. And Vince Young, it was a very balanced attack. He didn't light it up necessarily through the air. He had a ton of yards on the ground. He had a ton of yards through the air, but it's not like he threw for 4,000 yards and ran for 1,500. Like it was closer to 3,000 yards passing, and I think he had 1,000 yards rushing, and he had a bunch of touchdowns. Whatever. The point is, if you look at the Texas record books, I think that there's a chance that some of these records could be broken. Like the all-time best season in the history of Texas football throwing was Colt McCoy in 2008. He threw for 3,859 yards and 34 touchdowns. I feel like that is a number that Arch Manning could very realistically break this year, especially considering he's probably going to be playing more games if they get to a national championship. Like those games count toward record books. He'll have 16 instead of I believe Colt McCoy had 14 that year because of the Big 12 championship and the national title game, or I guess that was 2008. So he didn't even make it to a Big 12 championship game that year. That was Oklahoma, I guess. So he had 13 games that year. So Arch Manning will have 3 games more than Colt McCoy should he make it that far and have 3 extra games to try to break those records. And if you look at the receiving numbers, like Jordan Shipley in 2009 had 116 receptions. And he had 1,485 yards that season. Quan Cosby in 2008 had 92 receptions for 1,123 yards. So, like, those are records that theoretically could be broken. I don't know if the Jordan Shipley one's going to get broken, but maybe as a team they will be able to. So you see where I'm kind of going with this. Like, there's avenues in which it could be the most prolific offense in the history of Texas football. Maybe not all the way around. Maybe not in every category that, they won't rush for the most yards and throw for the most yards ever in both categories. But I think that when it comes to total offense, this offense does have a really good chance to do something special and break records. And yeah, the schedule is going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough. It's one of the hardest schedules in the entire country, but they are stacked up at every position you need to have a extremely prolific offense. And I think it could be the best offense in college football next year. I think it's going to be a top 5 offense. I just do.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Of course, with this new era of college football, you could potentially get, an SEC championship or an appearance in the SEC championship. You lose that game potentially. Okay, maybe you host a first round game. You have the quarterfinal. You have the semifinal. You have the national championship. That's potentially 5 postseason games extra. And I mean, you're just asking to break records at that point if you're Texas. So, yeah, by the numbers, the records argument is certainly there, just because of the sheer amount of games they've been playing. I do think that there's something to be said about just looking back with Colt McCoy and Jordan Shipley and those offenses, the kind of chemistry that those guys were able to build because they stayed in the program for so long. That's not a luxury that many teams have at this point. Sark talked about it yesterday that they're already diving deep into making sure that the culture and the chemistry is being built in February instead of beginning it in June or so. And so he's making sure that's a priority, but you just can't, create years of chemistry out of thin air. It's just not a reality. So I think that those teams maybe didn't have as much talent. Is Cam Coleman as talented as Jordan, or is Jordan Shipley as talented as Cam Coleman? Probably not. Cam Coleman is just, but the fact that we still feel so confident that Jordan Shipley's record won't be broken says so much about what him and Colt were able to do chemistry wise. Same with Quan Cosby. Yeah. Cam Coleman's more talented than both those guys, and that's really, really saying something. Not disrespect to those guys. He's just an absolute freak. So, I think as a whole, the team will be able to get close to those numbers, especially if they have multiple postseason games. But yeah, maybe some individual records will be a little bit tougher to be broken. I do think Arch, though, has a great chance for his individual records to get near Vince and Colts, because let's face it, he's not going to throw for 114 yards against Texas State like he did against UTEP. He's probably not going to throw for 132 yards against some of these lower SEC teams like he did against Kentucky. Against Ohio State, he threw for 170. He'll definitely get more than that, in my opinion, but it'll still be a tough matchup against Ohio State in Austin. But I don't think he'll look as bad as he did in that game. So you just look at some of these games from last season where the numbers were just, really not what you'd expect, especially against, in that UTEP game. Those numbers will go way up for Arch Manning in non-conference play. That'll boost his stats. And then you add on multiple postseason games. Who knows what his numbers will look like. At the end of the day, it was so impressive what he was able to do. The back half of SEC play, his only 2 interceptions, one of them came on a missed holding call against Georgia. The other one came on a dropped pass from Parker Livingston, and that was it. He really stepped up his game. So if he's playing like that next season from start to finish, I think he'll get close to breaking some individual records. And then the team as a whole may be able to do the same.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you bring that up, Zach, because I just want to run through his game log real quick before we move on to our next segment. He had games last year. Ohio State, he threw for 170. UTEP, like you said, 114. OU, just 166. Kentucky, 132. And Texas A&M, he only threw for 179. So he had a bunch of games where he didn't really light up the stat sheet throwing the football. In part, with the A&M game especially, it's because they were running the ball so well.
Yep.
But if you look at the best passing season in the history of Texas football, it was, like I said, Colt McCoy, 3,859 yards. Arch Manning last year, even with that amount of struggle in those games and in the not lighting the stat sheet on fire in those games, he still had the 10th best season in the history of Texas football individually. He threw for 3,163 yards, which is 10th all time in a single season. That's less than 700 yards behind Colt McCoy's record.
Yep.
So if he just plays, if he plays at a high level all year next year, and he, it doesn't even have to be 300 plus necessarily every single game, but if he doesn't have a couple of those stinkers like he had against UTEP and Kentucky, then I feel like he's going to shatter that record, especially if they go deep in the playoff. I feel like he's going to go for, 4,000 at least. And, could he, if he does that, does he break the passing touchdown record? Maybe. But we'll see. Like we said, it's a lot of projection. It's just a fun conversation to have, because it's such a loaded offense. One thing I'm pretty sure of, though, Zach, is it's not going to beat the 2019 LSU offense. Do you know the numbers for the 2019 LSU offense? I'm going to read them real quick just so everybody can be like, oh, my God. Joe Burrow threw for 5,671 yards and 60 touchdowns with just 6 interceptions. Okay. They also had a 1,400-yard rusher in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They had Jamar Chase catch 84 passes for 1,780 yards and 20 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson had 111 catches for 1,540 yards and 18 touchdowns. And Terrence Marshall also had 671 yards and 13 touchdowns. Let's not forget, too, Joe Burrow also ran for 368 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he had 6,000 yards of total offense just by himself. Arch probably ain't going to do that. And I've heard some people say that he's going to get close to those numbers. That ain't going to happen.
No,
but
there's no way.
In terms of the Texas record books, I think he has a really good shot.
Right.
Speaking of the portal additions, by the way, Zach, Steve Sarkisian came out and talked about his portal strategy. Texas obviously finished with one of the best portal classes in the country this past year, or this past cycle. And he talked about what his idea was and how he wanted to assemble this portal class. And coming up after this break, we're going to tell you exactly what he said about that yesterday on this episode of Texas Longhorns on SI podcast.
This episode of the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast is brought to you by Custom Built Trailers of Mississippi. Custom Built Trailers is the largest in-stock trailer dealer in Mississippi with a variety of options to choose from flatbed goosenecks to bumper pull equipment trailers and car haulers to enclosed trailers and basic utility trailers. We do a little bit of everything. And if we don't have exactly what you're looking for in stock, we can typically have your custom-built trailer built in 7 to 10 working days. 0% financing options are available, and we also deliver out of state. So give Custom Built Trailers of Mississippi a call at 601-722-9581 today and let us take care of your hauling needs. Custom Built Trailers of Mississippi. If we don't have it, we'll be glad to build it.
Welcome back. Thank you to my buddy Dalton for being the first sponsor of the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast. Like I mentioned, Texas had one of the better portal classes in the country this past cycle. Some had them finishing in the top 2 or 3. Some have them finishing in the top 5. Regardless, it is considered an elite portal class by every standard. They filled a ton of needs, especially on the offensive side of the ball, with elite talent. And they seem primed to contend for a national title as a result. What's interesting, though, is that there's this narrative flying around that all Texas did was go out there and throw money at all the best players and try to just, assemble the Avengers of college football, basically. And they pretty much did assemble the Avengers of college football when you look at them from position by position on offense. But it wasn't all just about the money. That is a complete misnomer. They had to let go of some key players, as a matter of fact, including Parker Livingston, Trey Wisner, Bo Barnes, guys that were probably going to have a big role on this team in 2026 in order to, have the funds to go chase after some big players. And it wasn't all just about the best players for Sark either. Yesterday, during his media availability, he revealed what his portal strategy was going into this thing. And he said, "We didn't sacrifice character for talent when we went into the transfer portal. These guys have connected much better and much sooner with our team than we ever have previously." And I think that that's very important to point out, because there's teams out there who are just going and signing as many good players as they possibly can. Like, that's kind of Texas Tech's mentality. And to Joey McGuire's credit, he made it work last year and they got to the college football playoff. But it was more than just about acquiring talent for Sark. And I think that that's incredibly important going forward as they continue to, delve into this new day and age of college football, where this is going to be a thing every transfer cycle.
I was muted. Sorry about that. This has been Sark's, mentality, I think, ever since he stepped foot on campus. And it's good that he's reiterating that fact too, that we're not going to sacrifice character for talent. You've heard him say that for a few seasons now. But in pursuit of a national championship, some programs might stray away from their beliefs and their core values. And it's clearly that he's not doing that with this staff and with this portal class. Of course, we don't know what those conversations are like with some of these new players. None of them have even spoken to the media yet, really. If I can't think of any that have, about why they chose Texas. We don't really know necessarily what their personalities are like quite yet. So you just trust that these guys really fit the culture and really fit what these coaches are looking for from a personality perspective, because you can have all the talent in the world. It doesn't mean anything if you're clashing in the locker room with guys. If you're an off the field issue, we've seen it before when there's been off the field issues. Jonte Cook, most notably, when there's off the field issues, there's a zero tolerance for that, and they'll get rid of you right away. And so any sort of sign that a player could be giving you issues in that regard, whether it's off the field or just, complaining about not getting the ball or complaining about lack of playing time, it really hasn't really worked out if under this staff, if that's going to be something that you're going to be dealing with as a player. So, you love to see that the mentality isn't changing despite the pursuit of a national championship, because, you may sacrifice some of those things if you're so desperate to win. And obviously Sark and this staff realize that they're approaching territory where it's championship or bust. It was championship or bust last season. It's kind of been championship or bust for the past 3 years, you could argue. So, but certainly this year, especially with the way things went last season, starting out preseason number 1, it's easy to kind of maybe forget some of those values. So I like to see that from Sark, not only in transfer portal recruiting, but in high school recruiting too. That's always been a big thing, because some of these guys, you see it sometimes with high school recruiting. Some of these guys maybe have a big head on their shoulders, but they haven't proven anything yet. And just because they're a 5-star, they may think that they're gonna, come and be a major contributor right away. And if you have that kind of attitude, it's clear that Sark and the staff, may not see eye to eye with you, and they'll look elsewhere. So I love that strategy. I love that these values and the mindset that the staff has. I think it'll bode well for this team as the season goes on, because you'll see this culture, I think, really show itself once the fall begins.
Yeah, and I think that a good example of this, well, there's a couple of good examples. The first one I'll point to is Cam Coleman. Like we talked about it kind of in earlier, it was like, people assumed that it was all just about money for Cam Coleman. In reality, it wasn't. Like, what he was going to get a bunch of money no matter what picked him. So no matter who picked or who he picked. So you're going to have to make a competitive offer one way or the other. But what Sark said was that really caught my ear yesterday about Cam Coleman was the biggest thing that came out of it for me was what an awesome individual. This kid is an awesome kid. He hasn't disappointed since he arrived. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but he also said, I think that one thing that has been unique once he's arrived, you got to remember Ryan Wingo and Emmett Mosley are both coming off injuries, so they're not able to do things that Cam's been required to do from a fundamental standpoint, from a workouts with Coach Becton, from skill development standpoint. And for a guy of his caliber, he could say, well, those two guys aren't working today. Maybe I'll take a step back and maybe I don't need to work today. It's been the total opposite. This guy is going for it. And he also said he came in here with real intentions and real reason of understanding. He wants to compete for a national championship. He wants to put himself in the best position to get ready for the NFL. We talked about that yesterday, but that is a good indicator of me. It wasn't just about going and getting the best receiver and the biggest difference maker in the portal. It was making sure that he's going to come in here and want to compete for a national championship and not compete for a paycheck. And that is really, really important. And then first of all, that also kind of reverberates around the roster as well. Like, if people see Cam Coleman, who's making, I've seen reports of $2 to $3 million, various reports of how much he's going to get. With a guy of his caliber, with that kind of paycheck, coming in and working harder than everybody else, that's going to reverberate around the roster and inspire other players to do the same so that they can get to his level. And I think that's really important aspect of a national title contender. The other really good example of this is a guy that Texas didn't pursue, and that's Jordan Seaton. Like, they pursued him at the beginning, and then they realized it was going to be kind of a mess, and they were going to have to spend a ton of money, and there was going to be all this hoopla surrounding it. Like, we saw the videos of him driving around with police escorts and contact my uncle with any business inquiries and like all this stuff. And that's not to say Jordan Seaton's a bad kid. But they were like, you know what? We're not going to deal with this. We're going to go out. We're going to get Melvin Siani, who's on par as a player. Maybe doesn't have the ceiling of an NFL draft pick as Jordan Seaton does. But this guy's going to come in, be happy with playing right tackle, and be a starter for us from day one. And we feel really great about his character. So those are two examples on opposite ends of the spectrum on how Texas approached this thing. And that's different than a lot of other schools have done it, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's a good point about Jordan Seaton. I kind of forgot about that. It's not saying he's a bad guy. I don't know the guy. I've never even seen him in any interviews, so I can't make any of those, statements like that. But from an outside perspective, it seemed like there was some distraction surrounding his entire portal recruitment because this guy knows that every program in the country is going to be coming after him. So maybe he. That affected the way that maybe he was seen from an outside perspective, and maybe that, along with the high price tag he was probably asking, is what likely prevented Texas from backing out of that that recruitment. So things like that. It makes a difference because you didn't really see that with Cam Coleman. Of course, Cam Coleman, the hype was already there. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to be available in the portal, and the hype was going to follow him. With Jordan Seaton, though, it seemed like things took a turn where he was visiting one program, and all of a sudden, now he's on a flight to visit another one. It was just back and forth. These quick developments. Didn't seem like he was really necessarily committed with any interest to a specific program during that process. It was kind of all over the place. And so maybe that's what potentially got Texas out of the running there. And I kind of like the way things worked out because he would have been a huge price tag. I'm not saying he would have been like a problem in the locker room or anything, because like I said, I don't know the guy's personality, but it seemed like there was just a lot of potential distractions there that you didn't really have to deal with. So Lane Kiffin, LSU, Lane Kiffin's kind of already somewhat of a distraction on his own. Let him deal with that. And I think that LSU will be very good because Jordan Seaton is on that roster, but it wasn't really something Texas needed to be dealing with, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lane Kiffin is going about this thing a completely different way. Yep. And that's okay. We'll see what ends up happening at LSU. We'll see what ends up happening at Texas. They face each other next year, so we'll see how that ends up. But I'm very confident in what Texas did in the portal on both sides of the ball, and you guys should also be very confident in what you're going to see on the field next year in terms of talent and in terms of chemistry and in terms of culture. This team seems like they are certainly on the right path. Changing gears real quick over to basketball to close out the show. Zach, Texas did not have the best game on Saturday. Their 6-game win streak was snapped by the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. Georgia won 91-80. It was a rough outing for Texas in terms of defense. The offense seemed to play pretty well, all things considered. They were 57% from the field, 50% from three. Dalen Swain had 21. Modest Voikatitis led the team with 22. Jordan Pope had 17. But you also had 0 from Cam Heide. You had 4 from Tremone Mark. And the bench scoring wasn't really there either. Kendall Weaver had 9, but outside of that, it was pretty vacant from the reserves on the bench. And Georgia came out and lit it up. And they're a fantastic offensive team. There was at one point in the season, they were the best offensive team in the country, if I remember correctly. They had 5 guys in double figures. They hit 60% from the field, 55% from three. And Sean Miller was not happy about it, was he?
No, he wasn't. He met with the media today. I was on that Zoom call listening into what he had to say. He was kind of previewing the Florida game tomorrow night, which I'll talk about in a second. But he hasn't been shy when it comes to, lighting his team up with some public criticism this season. And a lot of people have liked that from him. And I think it's actually been to the team's benefit this year because whenever he's done that, it seems to have kind of lit a fire under these guys. And it's kind of been a factor, in my opinion, in why they were able to turn the season around and why they're even in a contention for a spot in March Madness at this point. But yeah, earlier today, he said, you guys have the numbers, but this is probably the worst defensive team that I've ever had. It's disappointing because it's one of the best offensive teams, but we get very little help on defense. And what he means by very little help on defense is that our defense isn't creating turnovers. It's not creating blocks. It's not creating potential fast break opportunities where your offense is able to get easy points. I mean, it says a lot about what this team's offense is capable of, that despite all of that, they're still number 6 in total offense, according to KenPom, which is on par with Michigan, Alabama, Illinois, Purdue. That's better than Duke's offense. That's pretty crazy. Duke does have the number 2 defense, though, where Texas has the number 118 defense, according to KenPom. That's the worst defensive rating among the top 50 teams in KenPom's ratings. So that has to be on par with, I don't have Sean Miller's been coaching for a long time. I don't have all the numbers pulled up right now. That has to be on par with some of the worst that Sean Miller has coached, I could imagine. So it's just, if this team can even play average defense for the rest of the season and then headed into March, there's a lot of reason to feel confident about what they could do when it comes to potentially pulling an upset or something like that. Because if you can just play average defense and let your offense continue to be elite, especially with the way this team is constructed offensively with Dalen Swain, Tremone Mark, Modest Voikatitis, Jordan Pope, all being able to score on their own. I think there's some upset potential there for Texas to knock off a higher seed, but that's not going to mean anything if they can't defend worth a lick. So, the Georgia game, just kind of recapping that really quick. The Longhorns dug themselves way too deep of a hole, fell down like 18 in the first half. They cut it to single digits before the halftime, went down by like 10 at halftime, I believe. And then eventually tied the game in the second half with like a few minutes to go. And then Georgia just came back alive. They were hitting some tough shots. I'll give the Bulldogs credit, but also there was just some, horrible defensive, rotations, communication moments. And it was just not a good showing once again for the Longhorns in that regard. The offense still looked pretty decent, but it was just some major turnover issues in the first half that got them into that hole. Because if they hadn't gotten down by so much, this is a game that probably could have been won. Yeah, I know the final score was 11, but it was a close game within the last few minutes, which is crazy to think because Texas looked like they were about to get blown out of the water, but the offense kept them in it, which says a lot about what this team can do. So against Florida tomorrow, it's going to be really, really tough. The Gators lead the country in rebounds per game and offensive rebounds per game. That is an incredible stat. So the Longhorns are going to have their hands full. Modest Boogie Titus is going to have his hands full. The Gators have multiple guys that are just absolutely huge. Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu, Thomas Houck. He plays more of a 4. He can play, a 3 as well, and he just does it all for the Gators. So they're really scary. Number 7 in the country right now. It's hard to win back-to-back titles, but they certainly could do it this year. I feel very confident about that. So they're defending national champions for a reason. But yeah, the defense has to just play at least average, and the Longhorns can compete with anyone because, as we've seen. I know there's a double-digit loss to Georgia, but the game was actually pretty close. But Texas they haven't really in any of their SEC losses except for the Tennessee game, they haven't gotten blown out in any of these games. It's been competitive. They've beaten some ranked teams, so if they can stay competitive with Florida and potentially give themselves a chance in the second half, I think fans will feel confident. But obviously you want to come out of there with a win and not another loss. But yeah, you got to fix the defensive issues, or you're not going to be able to do anything in March. And you even put yourself in danger of missing out on March Madness because if you go 0-4 in these final 4 games, you're going to be right back on the bubble, and it's going to be some nervous people in that building on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how much of a factor this has played in their defensive efforts, Zach, and maybe you can call me an idiot, or you can say, yeah, you're right. Whatever. I'm not sure, but it seems like having a very undersized point guard who doesn't match up well, especially in the SEC on the defensive end of the court is a big factor. And then the other factor is that they have basically no, they're completely outmatched almost every game that they play at the 4 position because Cam Heide is not capable of defending against these bigger, 4 guys in the SEC. So both of those things are playing a factor, but also it's, defense in college basketball is also very, very much about team effort. And I feel like maybe the effort is definitely there on the offensive side of the ball, and it's been there for quite a while now on the offensive side of the ball. It just feels like it almost feels like there's so much spent on that side that it's starting to affect them on the defensive side. And how do you balance that out? I don't know. You definitely don't want to sacrifice the number 5. It was a top 10 offense. I think it was number 5 at one point. 6. I'm not sure where it is now. Yeah. Number 6 offense in the country. You don't want to sacrifice something that elite. Right. But at the same time, it's like if you can't stop anybody, then it almost does you no good to a certain extent. I mean, I think back to the Steve Nash Phoenix Suns, and they were so good offensively, and there were some seasons where they could play pretty well defensively, and there was other seasons where they just couldn't stop anybody. And it's like, okay, how do you balance that out if you're Sean Miller? It's really tough. Maybe this, maybe him getting so heated and getting under them and getting on their ass is going to kind of inspire them to play a little bit harder on the defensive side of the ball. But when you're only 8 deep, it's a little hard to keep that effort going the entire time. So we'll have to see how it goes. But it feels like all of that stuff is kind of an amalgamation of why this defense is starting to struggle.
Yeah, you're right on the money, especially when you mentioned you didn't mention him by name, but Jordan Pope. He's liability is just maybe a strong word, but maybe it's not. Defense is not his strength. He's undersized. He's not overly athletic at all. He's a great shooter, in my opinion. Point guard is not even really his natural position, if you're going to ask me. But that's what Sean Miller has been making him do this season, and it's been working out. So
I don't have another one, so.
Yeah, exactly. They have no other option, really. And so I think Jordan Pope, he's going to get, I mean, think about who they're going to be playing here soon in Arkansas. Darius Acuff, who just had, 49 points as a true freshman on the road in Tuscaloosa last week. You're asking Jordan Pope to guard him? No, probably not. So it's going to be really, really, really tough. Whenever you have an undersized point guard who's not overly athletic. I love Jordan Pope. I think he's a great offensive player and he's an excellent shooter. But that is an issue for sure. And you mentioned being overly extended on the defensive end after some of these offensive possessions, because Texas has a pretty slow tempo on offense despite how efficient they've been. And so when you have these long, mentally draining possessions that end in the last second shot at the shot clock buzzer, that's going to be kind of tough because you're not scoring quick and then getting back on defense. So I agree with you there. And it would be quite a shame if an offense this elite misses out on March Madness. I don't know, when I'll have to do some research on that. I don't know when the last time a potential top 10 offense missed out on the tournament. That seems almost unprecedented. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, you just have to be at least an above average or at least an average or slightly below average defense. And this team, I think, can do some good things in March, make a little bit of noise, but they're not even going to get a chance to potentially do that if they don't fix things even a little bit these last 4 games.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. It's not exactly easy sledding coming up. Zach mentioned Texas will be facing off against the Florida Gators tomorrow night at the Moody Center. At least the game's at home, right? So we'll see what happens there. And then they have back-to-back road matchups against Texas A&M on February 28th, and then Arkansas at Arkansas on March 4th before they close the season at the Moody Center against the Oklahoma Sooners. So pretty tough stretch coming up. Hopefully they can get the defense rectified during that time frame. But if not, who knows what's going to happen, because all 4 of those teams are certainly capable of beating them if they don't show up defensively. So we'll see where it goes. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and subscribe for our podcast, and comment below on YouTube to let us know what you think. It really helps us out with the algorithm and everything like that, so we really appreciate it. Make sure to follow us on every major social media platform. We are on X at Longhorns on SI, on TikTok and Instagram, and Facebook at Texas Longhorns on SI. Zach is on X at ZachDimmitt7. I am on X at Matt Galatson. But most importantly, be sure to tell somebody you love them, and we will catch you in the next one.